a move to digital manufacturing. Will warehouse space become more affordable? And America's worst traffic bottlenecks. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. How can you drive down your cost per unit and make every movement count? Read Zebra Robotics Automation's latest ebook, Unlocking Fulfillment Potential, to learn how their Zebra Symmetry fulfillment ecosystem was engineered to boost your profits. You'll discover a unique threefold strategy that enables workers to pick more items in less time, with up to 30% fewer robots compared to legacy systems. Download it now at zebra.com/fulfillment. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, there's been a push in the last few years to do more manufacturing here at home. And one of the key technologies that is enabling more domestic production is digital manufacturing. That's where Haddy comes in. Haddy is the world's first 3D printed furniture manufacturer, powered by AI and advanced robotic technology. I recently spoke with Jay Rogers, Haddy's CEO and co-founder, about this unique approach to manufacturing. Here is our conversation. Thank you, Jay, and welcome to Logistics Matters. It's good to have you with us today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure.
So first of all, can you tell me a little bit about Haddy and how this unique company came about?
Absolutely. So Hattie is an outgrowth of both bigger trends and really tactical ones. So we have really believed in the future of distributed digital manufacturing for a long time. My team and I and our advisors and the whole network. And so in the big trends of things, the world has gone from being heavily globalized with large supply chains to being something where those supply chains are being stressed for reasons like terrorism and taxation and tariffs and other things like that. At the same end of these COVID, and at the same time that more capabilities are being made locally to be able to do more full content locally, and it is an outgrowth. Hattie is an outgrowth of those general trends, and then more specifically the technologies for being able to make things 3D printed have come along in non even rates or in lumpy rates. We have heard of and seen things like tissue printing, things like food printing, which still in many ways has work to come along to meet consumer desires. Then we have seen other things like printing for trays for dental aligners that have come along a lot. And so those lumpiness defines the tactical or short-term ways in which supply chains can be shortened. And particularly for Hattie, we saw an opportunity in large-scale structural printing to be able to approach the furniture and furnishings industry at this time. So taking advantage of the larger trend, and then also the fact that the technology and software is here for this near-term capability.
Jay, of course, the furniture market is a very mature market. Why did you see this as a market that was ready for disruption?
That's a great question, David. The furniture market, in the way that we see it, is actually a market that has been disrupted many times. So, the furniture market, let's just say in the last 200 years for US consumption, was originally in England, then went to Boston, the Midwest, and came to North Carolina, and then eventually went to Taiwan, then went to China, and then from China went to Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, those things. So, the manufacturing for consumption in the United States, if we're thinking about this part of the furniture industry, has moved around the world, and each place that it moved with a different kind of disruption. You can look at things like glue laminated plywood with Herman Miller, Miller Knoll, and the Eames movement, and you can look at many other kinds of machine-driven or human-driven, power-driven, steam, electricity, other things like that, and they have begot different types of furniture too. I think the way we look at it is furniture has been continuously disrupted, sometimes by labor markets and sometimes by machines and by methods, foams and fabrics included. And so what's happening now is that we're talking about really a change in the labor allocation around furniture. Furniture has traditionally been put together by hands, and it's an opportunity now to move those hands to work around the edges of furniture production, like robotics and programming and design, but not have the hands make the furniture. And so we just see this mature market as being one that's been for the last 200 years continuously disrupted. And this disruption has a lot to do with changing the way that labor interacts with the making of furniture.
So how do your 3D printers actually create the furniture for Hattie?
So the 3D printers are what we would call hybrid systems. And, for the people that are, in this industry, they recognize that all 3D printing is not the same thing. And when we say hybrid, what we mean is that they're not actually just printers. They are holders, printers, and polishing, cutting, subtractive, milling, other things like that. So the manufacturing has all those methods in them. You measure things, you print things, which is the additive portion of them. Then you can do subtractive and polishing, remeasuring, moving, and printing again. And so these hybrid systems, quite simply in that way, are the makers of the furniture, if you will. It's pretty much that simple.
That's very interesting. What types of products are you making?
We have started really in the case goods, what I would call the hard line stuff, as they say. Some people call it hard lines, some people call it case goods. And I want to note that we really are in furniture, furnishings, and architecture. We don't see the necessity to break those apart. Like if you look in a home and you look at like all of the things around you, cabinets, bookshelves, freestanding bookshelves, chairs, tables, banquettes. There are thousands of names of pieces of furniture and furnishings you have around. They are all in the built environment. The ones that we focus on the most are the ones that are hard lines. So the stuff that doesn't have upholstery around it to begin with. It's not that upholstery isn't necessary in furniture, it's quite used in many, many pieces. But right now, we have found that digital furniture becomes analog again when you are engaging with the sewing of furniture. And so, to be able to move quickly and fully express the nature of digital manufacturing, we're sticking to the hard lines groups for the most part. Now, I will also say that we have debuted a couple of pieces that have 3D printed cushions, which are super cool. And so that allows us to be able to do cushioned furniture instead of just hard lines or case goods, and to do it with 3D printing. So a little bit of a caveat in what I just said, but more and more is coming every year on 3D printing, and not a surprise to see things like cushions being on that list.
When you mention hard lines, can you define that a little bit more? The types of things that are hard lines? Are these mostly tables and bookcases and those sort of things?
Hard lines and case goods are kind of what they sound. Well, what hard lines sounds, which is it's hard. So tables and rigid chairs, if you will, planters, bookcases, cabinets, those kinds of things. And tables, there's just such a large variety. You have the conference table world and the dining table world and the high top table world and the occasional table world, the bedside table, all those sorts of things. And so up to and including even the hybrids of bookshelves, which are things like over the toilet shelves, or in other countries they call them étagères. And so all of those are parts of what we would call hard lines or case goods.
Of course, 3D printers make things in layers. What type of materials are you using and running through your 3D printers to create this furniture?
So we used recycled materials, and we are using the broadest family would be called polymer composites. And what that really means is that they have some sort of polymerized chain. It can be a bio compostable polymer, it could be a synthetic polymer. And what we look for is we look for either recycled or biocompostable that will be recycled in the earth polymers. And then we reinforce them with fibers, and that's what makes them composites. So fibers and fillers. And so a filler could be a color. A fiber could be hemp. It could be bamboo. In the biocompostables, we marry those with biofibers. And then on the technical or synthetic materials, we marry them with things like glass fibers or carbon fibers. And that makes up the composites.
Of course, being the fact that you're doing 3D printing, can you customize those designs more easily?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the great promises of 3D printing is that it didn't have a mold or it didn't have a tool. It existed in the digital realm before it became physical. And so customization is part and parcel, it's party to this change in the business. It's really important. I would also add that that does not mean that people want one-off furniture. Just because we can doesn't mean we are saying to everyone, "You get one, and we break the mold," so to speak, the digital mold. We still feel like people like styles and trends, and so, but the customization really allows enterprise clients like businesses, retailers, architects, people that are building the built environment. It really allows them to think more freely because today, the real problem in the furniture and furnishings industries, in the hardline and case goods, and really in furniture overall, is when you tool up to make something with a jig, a fixture, a mold, those sorts of things, you tend to be less creative because you know that once you do something, you have paid for that tool, and then you have to sell a lot of them. Which means if you got it wrong, that's a penalty associated with it. So we think that customization is probably most useful to the fact that people can iterate quickly. And I also want to note that when we talked about our material is fully recyclable. So it is an important caveat when you think about like customization. Not only do designers fear less because they can do something digitally first without having to build a tool and be committed to it, but also when we do print something the first time, if it doesn't work, we can recycle it. And so that means even the very first print is not a penalty. So it really actually rewards both digital and physical iteration.
Kind of delving into that a little bit further, obviously you had mentioned about the sustainability, using recycled materials and having all of your furniture be able to be recycled after its useful life. Can you talk a little bit about how your model reduces waste and helps to support a circular economy and sustainability?
A circular economy is really something that must be planned for. And so, back to the days where it's sort of like if you put out an aluminum can and it says on it in the stamping, 5-cent return, you have more than just that because you need to arrange a network and other things where people can return cans and other things like that. Or if food waste, you see, a lot of organization with waste and recycling companies. And in our furniture, one of the things that we have planned is that we really are moving on distributed digital manufacturing, where we're putting our micro factories in regions around the world, where when we send furniture out from that micro factory, it goes to around a 10-hour radius around the micro factory, which is a pretty large area. I mean, you could cover the United States with, 4 or 5 micro factories. And what that means is that we can credibly build our recycling network with our micro factories. And that means that when we sell technical composites, the things we've talked about that have glass and carbon fiber and synthetic polymers in them, we're using recycled polymer. So we're starting with recycled feedstock. So we're removing that from going into landfill. And then we are saying to our enterprise customers, this is extremely durable furniture. But when you're ready to run a special and give a credit to your customers to get that material back, we are a willing buyer of that material because it's lower cost for us once it's already been composited and created and recaptured. So our microfactory network is a well thought out network for how to do circularity in concert with our enterprise customers.
And of course, being that you're doing 3D printing, you do have a unique distribution network. Can you talk a little bit about what your typical microfactory looks like and how you distribute from that?
A microfactory is a 30,000 square foot box that contains mainly robots that are making furniture and shipping docks. And so we don't intend for our microfactories to be storage and transit facilities or the likes of which you've seen in the traditional furniture industry, where there are warehouses and transshipment warehouses and all of the things that are the trappings of a global supply chain. And so a microfactory is meant to print and put on a dock and ship out. It is the kind of thing which looks to ship out both direct to retailer, but more direct to distribution center. So I think that DCs, as we think about them in the logistics industries, still have a great part of being the head end. But I think what changes in a microfactory world is sort of the global transshipment shipping lines and the warehousing at ports and other items like that. And so a microfactory is a regional enabler of distribution and manufacturing.
So things are pretty much print to order as opposed to
Yeah,
print to stock.
It's a great question and it's a great thought. And it's the easiest way to think about it. We receive an order digitally. I mean, think about the world of Shopify now and Ship Center that's attended to Shopify, or all of the other kinds of digital transfer of order content. If it can really be put on a digital chain, then you can receive the order print and it can go out on a truck the next day. I think it doesn't take a lot for somebody to say, oh my gosh, wow, the world has really changed overnight. Like I could order my furniture and get it the next day if I was within arm's reach of a microfactory. We may get there someday with our microfactory. Right now, we aren't set up to do mini delivery to one customer out of a microfactory. So we still want to partner with retailers very much. It's important. We are a enterprise company that partners with architects, designers, builders, and retailers, and then they distribute to their customers. We are not trying to go direct to consumer at this stage. It's not the way a microfactory is set up to distribute. And so that gives a little more color about what the microfactory is and who we serve.
It's a very interesting concept, and I wish you well in it.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk about it, David.
We've been talking today with Jay Rogers. He's the CEO of Haddy. And again, thanks, Jay, for being with us.
David, pleasure.
Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, you wrote this week about some good news for a change that affects the affordability of warehouse space. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I'm glad to. Businesses are pretty adaptable to most economic challenges as long as they know that they'll have clear, consistent policies to plan for over the long term. As we know, that's not so much true at the moment, since we're living in a time with a lot of changes in government funding and regulations and tariffs and so on. But I did find one area this week that could make conditions a little easier in one sector, and as we mentioned, that's warehouse rental rates. This came from a report from Colliers, the industrial real estate firm, on fourth quarter warehouse construction in the US. And they said that renters of warehouse space should begin to see some relief after some seriously steep rent hikes that they've seen in recent years. According to Colliers, rent growth decelerated in 2024, so still growing but more slowly, after 9 consecutive quarters of year-over-year increases that on average surpassed 10%. In some markets, those rent increases were more than 25%. But in the fourth quarter, average warehouse distribution center rents rose by only 5% to 10% as a national average. And it's on track to get even lower, as Colliers said that warehouse rents are projected to stabilize as we move through 2025, rising between 2% to 5%. And that's about in line with historical averages.
Well, that sounds good. But of course, you did mention that those incredibly expensive rates for warehouse space in the last couple of years. Did the report explain why those have been such big changes?
Yes, the simple answer, as we see so often, is the pandemic. As we all saw during the COVID pandemic, e-commerce just exploded in 2020, 2021, 2022. So developers constructed a lot of new building space, and they basically charge whatever they want. But in the fourth quarter of 2024 that we just went through, that frantic construction pace finally declined back to pre-pandemic levels. The amount of new square feet of warehouse space that was built during 2024 was actually 34% less than the year before. So it didn't just fall by a little, it dropped by more than a third. And that's because the US industrial vacancy rate rose, which means that developers had finally built more space than the market needed. So with supply and demand here in the beginning of 2025 now nearing equilibrium, Colliers said that the vacancy rate is expected to keep rising a little bit and peak at around 7% vacancy in the middle of 2025 before slowly starting to fall and tighten up a little again. As for a little bit farther into the future, Colliers said that the US economy remains strong by most measures. We have good numbers for things like employment and consumer spending and gross domestic product. But again, it's a stormy time, so who knows what will come.
Right, and I think now there are probably more questions to be answered yet later this year.
There sure are. We will try to keep an eye on them.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And Victoria, you shared a report this week that listed the sections of our nation's roads that have the top bottlenecks for trucks. Can you provide the details?
Absolutely, Dave. Happy to. So, the American Transportation Research Institute, or ATRI as it's known, released its annual list of the nation's top truck bottlenecks this week. This is the group's 14th annual report on this issue, and its goal is not only to identify the top congested freight markets, but also to help local, state, and federal governments target funding to areas most in need of relief. The full report shares ways to reduce choke points, lower emissions, and drive economic growth. The information is used by a wide range of industry stakeholders, including the Department of Transportation. All that said, New Jersey is home to the top truck bottleneck for the 7th straight year, specifically the intersection of I-95 and State Route 4 near the George Washington Bridge in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Victoria, it is kind of interesting that that's the worst truck bottleneck in the nation. Or do those ever get resolved? And how actually does ATRI determine the top choke points, and what other regions are on the list?
Yeah, that's a good point. ATRI said its analysis has helped improve things in some spots. They point to improvements at Chicago's Jane Byrne interchange as an example. It was once the number one truck bottleneck in the country for 3 years in a row, and the recently constructed interchange saw rush hour traffic speeds improve by nearly 25% after construction was completed. So there's one example of some improvement that has been made as a result of this data. To answer your other question, though, the analysis is based on an extensive database of freight truck GPS data and uses several customized software applications and analysis methods, along with lots of additional data from trucking operations, to produce a congestion impact ranking for 325 locations across the country. The report out this week details the top 100 congested locations, but ATRI says it continuously monitors a list of more than 325 freight critical locations. So there's a lot of places that they're monitoring here. In addition to I-95 in New Jersey, which I mentioned at the outset, I can tell you that there are 6 other cities that round out the top 10 freight bottlenecks. They are Chicago, Houston, Atlanta, Nashville, Los Angeles, and Cincinnati. Atlanta is home to 3 of those bottlenecks, and Houston is home to 2. Listeners can learn more by checking out our story, which includes a link to the ATRI report.
And Victoria, I can imagine our listeners who commute regularly to work can probably add quite a few other traffic bottlenecks that they too encounter on their travels.
I am sure of that.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Jay Rogers of Haddy for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder that Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. Are you tired of overpriced, underutilized autonomous mobile robot fulfillment solutions that drain your profits? It's time to switch to Zebra Robotics Automation. Their cutting-edge Zebra Symmetry fulfillment solution is engineered to reduce your cost per unit and give you that unbeatable competitive edge. Don't settle for less. Maximize your profits with Zebra. Discover the future of fulfillment at zebra.com/fulfillment. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.